All the players now at the table, including Premier Eby and Prime Minister Carney. This was one big strategy session.
Canadian governments around this table will do whatever it takes to defend and support our families, our workers, and our businesses.
With 50% tariffs on various Canadian products set to kick in August 19th, Carney didn't rule out retaliatory measures of any kind.
Everything's on the table if there's no agreement, depending on the outcome of the negotiation.
But the Prime Minister's warning was short on specifics. Carney saying he wants to keep his cards close to his vest.
We don't need to respond in advance. In fact, I think it would be counterproductive at this stage to respond in advance. But it's important to know what your options are.
Still, some premiers didn't hold back. Ontario's Doug Ford has said he wants to see energy leveraged and supports an aggressive response, volunteering his province's resources as part of a Team Canada attack.
We have to hit them back with everything we have until they feel the pain.
Canada is quietly preparing for a fight that could change everything. As pressure from Washington grows, Canada is making it clear that every option is still on the table. But the move that was meant to hurt Canada could soon create an even bigger problem for the United States. Canada's premiers gathered with Prime Minister Mark Carney this week to coordinate a response to American tariffs that reach as high as 50% on some Canadian exports. The measures threaten thousands of jobs and disrupt cross-border trade in industries built around the American market. Carney's message was unambiguous. Canada will not rule out any option in defending its workers and businesses. Countermeasures are ready if negotiations fail. And the coordination challenge that could determine whether Canada's response holds together has now become the central question. The tariff structure Canada is responding to arrived in two distinct waves within a single week. On July 20th, Trump signed proclamations imposing 50% tariffs on a broad range of Canadian goods: wine, dairy products, cement, furniture, ice hockey equipment, and motor vehicle components, targeting an estimated $28 billion in Canadian exports. On July 23rd, the administration announced a separate 10% tariff tied to forced labor concerns applied to Canada and dozens of other countries. Energy, potash, critical minerals, and fish received exemptions from the 50% measures. The two tariff actions operate under different legal authorities and on different timelines, requiring Canada to develop parallel responses to each. Carney's public position, when asked what options Canada is prepared to use, has been consistent. Everything is on the table. That phrase describes a deliberately undefined response posture, one that keeps countermeasures available without committing to specific retaliation before negotiations have run their course. Carney and Trump spoke directly on July 21st and agreed to intensify trade discussions within the 30-day window before the 50% tariffs take effect on August 19th. The negotiating track and the retaliation preparation are proceeding simultaneously, not sequentially. The provincial coordination that Carney convened is the mechanism through which Canada's response will either hold together or fracture. Premiers met at the Council of the Federation in Prince Edward Island and then continued discussions with Carney to develop a united strategy. But BNN Bloomberg reported that economists are warning the gaps in tariff effects among provinces could test the unity of Canada's coordinated response. Ontario absorbs the majority of the $28 billion national impact because it is Canada's automotive and manufacturing center. Quebec's aluminum smelters carry the concentrated weight of the 50% aluminum tariff. British Columbia's forestry sector faces the lumber duties. Alberta and Saskatchewan received exemptions on energy, potash, and critical minerals, leaving those provinces less directly exposed. That uneven distribution creates different incentive structures across provinces. A province facing severe tariff damage has a different calculation on how aggressively to retaliate than a province whose primary exports were exempted. Ontario's willingness to escalate differs from Alberta's. Quebec's aluminum exposure differs from Saskatchewan's potash exemption. The Team Canada framing that federal and provincial governments have used since early 2025 depends on all provinces accepting shared costs for a shared negotiating position, a proposition that becomes harder to maintain as the tariff burden concentrates in specific regions. Ontario Premier Doug Ford identified where the retaliation could escalate if talks fail. We are an energy powerhouse, and we could dismantle the US if we wanted to, if we all work together, Ford said at the Council of the Federation, naming electricity, potash, and oil specifically, while noting he was not speaking for other provinces. That statement describes precisely the coordination requirement economists have flagged. Ontario controls its electricity exports. Saskatchewan controls potash. Alberta controls oil. Any coordinated national energy leverage strategy requires 3 provincial governments plus Ottawa to agree simultaneously. The energy leverage Ford described is documented and structurally significant. Ontario's electricity exports serve approximately 1.5 million American customers in Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. Canada supplies approximately 85% of American potash imports, with Saskatchewan's production capacity 36 times larger than total American domestic output. Canada supplied 63.4% of all U.S. crude oil imports in 2025, with Midwest and Gulf Coast refineries physically configured to process Alberta heavy crude that cannot be substituted with domestic alternatives on any near-term timeline. Those 3 commodity positions represent the hardest retaliation options available to Canada, and the ones requiring the most complex interprovincial coordination to deploy. Ford's electricity surcharge from March 2025 remains the operational precedent for that leverage. He imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to 3 American states. It lasted less than 24 hours before being suspended following direct negotiations with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. After Trump threatened to double steel and aluminum tariffs in response, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro confirmed the steel and aluminum escalation would not proceed once Ford paused the surcharge. The mechanism produced immediate senior-level American engagement within a single business day. It was suspended, not eliminated. Ford has stated it can return if Washington escalates further. Canada's existing counter-tariffs remain in force as the foundation of any additional retaliation. Canada responded to the original February 2025 tariffs with retaliatory measures that escalated to $155 billion in covered U.S. goods. Those counter-tariffs on American steel, aluminum, and a range of consumer products have not been withdrawn. Any hardest response scenario Canada develops would build on that existing structure, rather than starting from zero. Canada's negotiating position includes commitments, its own legislation, prevents it from trading away. Bill C-2, passed by Parliament in 2025, legally prohibits Canadian negotiators from offering additional concessions on supply-managed sectors, including dairy, poultry, and eggs.